All right. So as I said, we are here for building capacity, organizing, and partnerships, and we're very glad that you're with us tonight. And before we get started, we just have some slides to review. I know if you've been going to the conference, you've probably seen these before, but we're going to go over them again. On this slide, you can see that there's an interactive map, which you can find at the link that's posted. Someone will drop that into the chat. We are showing the slide as a way of acknowledging that we are presenting, attending, and hosting this workshop from land that was managed and inhabited before European colonization. As a land-based organization, we want to encourage everyone to learn more about the people who inhabited the land and who are still here today. One way to begin that process and journey is going to the link that's provided to learn about the history of the land that you occupy and manage, and to find additional learning resources there. We owe so much of what we know about how to grow food and manage land in a way that is regenerative and ecologically responsible to the people who were here before European colonization, and also to the people who were brought here to the US as slaves. We encourage folks to learn about the ongoing history of Black exclusion from property and farmland ownership, and to support local Black and Indigenous groups as part of your environmental and land-based work. Some suggested ways for doing that are listed on the screen, and you can refer to this slide when you look at the recording later. We all know Zoom etiquette after this year, I think, but we're going to go over it one more time. This account is set to mute participants upon entry. To speak, when it's time to have a question, you can just press the microphone button at the bottom of your screen. Please mute yourself when you are not speaking to avoid background noise and interfering with other speakers. Please use the chat feature to comment at any point during the workshop. You can post questions there at any time. I will be monitoring it, as will some of the presenters, and we'll address some of the questions as we go along, and then some others we may save until the Q&A at the end. And then, of course, please note that this session is being recorded. We have many sponsors to thank for making this conference possible, and we encourage you to purchase from them. And when you are a customer of theirs, of course, tell them that we are very thankful that they support NOFA Mass. And here are some more. Thank you to all of these entities. I also want to make you aware that the online auction is still happening, so please visit and bid often. There are a lot of really cool things there, including a microscope that I have my eye on personally. And this is our these are our virtual vendors. We encourage you to visit our virtual vendor place on the website, and to purchase from them. They are supporters of ours as well. Okay, so with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen. Did I successfully stop sharing my screen? Yes, okay. Thank you. So at this point, I would like to introduce one of our presenters, Ulum Pixan, who will continue introductions of the other co-presenters. Ulum is the education director at NOFA Mass. She's also the farming director and education coordinator of Tuckaway Farm Cooperative and Global Village Farms, which build community through food and farming. She is also co-founder of the Indigenous Peoples Network, a collaboration with local Indigenous peoples and people all over New England, recognizing ancestral struggles and forming unity by sharing resources and technologies that have been passed down as ancestral knowledge. Thank you, Ulum. Take it away. Oh,
thank you, everyone. Sorry. Thank you, Rosemary, for that beautiful introduction. And I'm going to speak a little bit slower as people will feel, but I'm an interpreter by heart, and I know my sisters are hardworking when it's late. So excuse me that English is not my first language, so I have to think first and then translate in my brain, and then it comes out. I'm super excited to talk about this topic specifically because Chief George and I and Matt have been doing a lot of work in the last 5, maybe 6 years to try to make this happen. So it's kind of surreal that we're here doing this work and doing this presentation. So first, I want to thank the ancestors for giving us life and giving us their support, and also our partners in this endeavor. So I'm going to present Matt Feinstein. He is the co-director at Global Village Farm with me, and he's also a co-op guru and spend a lot of time refining and teaching co-op technologies and other things. So I'm not gonna say more than, I know a lot of things that I shouldn't say, so might as well he takes it on.
So first of all, we want to start by framing, our collaboration came together around the issue of the farm, what we can call for today, the farm gap, right? When we're talking about inequities, racism, the exclusion of Indigenous people from, food productive systems and benefiting from those systems and being, so a couple specifics around that. Black, Indigenous, people of color farmers, they've faced health, they've faced theft of land, theft of other capital and property, and forced migration, redlining, and other structural and institutional racism. So that's brought us to a place where Black, Indigenous, people of color farmers only operate 5% of the farms in the US and only cultivate less than 1% of US farmland. But at the same time, are a majority of the farm workers that make up 2.4 million workers here just in the US who don't own and operate their farms. So that ownership component, the benefit component, the long-term wealth that, that are the disparities around wealth because of farm and land ownership is what's brought us together. But we also have seen a positive trajectory because of grassroots efforts primarily. So Black, Indigenous, people of color operated farms have increased. In 2007, they were 1.3% of all the farms in Massachusetts. And yeah, the slide doesn't say, but this is a Massachusetts stat. And then in 2017, they were 3.3. So it's on the increase. It's still a total inequity because, BIPOC folks make up closer to 20 or 30% in Massachusetts, but are only still represented in terms of land ownership and farm operation way under that. So that kind of inequity, but it's going in the right direction. And another positive thing we see is the increase of worker co-op farms each year. So because worker co-op farms especially, and this is nationally, we're seeing this, I work with the US Federation of Worker Cooperatives, and we see this growth in the co-op movement in land-based projects and farming and seed farming and things like that, led by folks of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So, because it's a pathway to joint ownership, this is significant, joint ownership and wealth building. And then the other positive thing we see is that people who are making the decisions around resources are beginning to wake up and implement equity practices and are understanding racial equity in a deeper way. And this isn't just because, white folks have woken up on their own. This is because grassroots folks have pushed this, this lens and have done good organizing and relationship building. So I think some of the partnerships we have going are a good key indicator of that. One is that all the partners today will be talking about is a collaboration with USDA's NRCS program. And for that, we're doing outreach and application support and education programming, including today's workshop, demonstration sites, and direct conservation of tribal land, all to Indigenous folks and Black and other people of color in Maine, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. So we'll be talking more about that partnership, but that's one of the key programs we have coming together in this current partnership. And we just started, we haven't begun the programming yet, but we're just awarded a USDA Beginner Farmer and Rancher Development Program grant. So with that, we'll be doing more needs assessment and existing resource assessment for BIPOC beginning farmers. So we know what's out there, and then we'll start to fill in gaps, including a 6-day intensive education program here at Global Village, where we'll be going through strategic planning and business planning work with farmer co-ops. And we'll be doing an ongoing support program with like monthly calls and a few in-person educational events for a broader network of farmers. So that's some of the key partner work we're doing, and we'll be getting into more details. I'll pass it back to Ulum to describe this partnership.
So to back up a little bit on the history of how we got here and how we started this partnership, Chief George and I met in a coalition meeting in Worcester, and we both talked about, our very exclusive struggles, and quickly realized they were very similar struggles, and decided that, if we cannot do it alone, we have to join forces and fight this together, and created the IPN, the Indigenous Peoples Network, which basically was an education component around Indigenous people's rights, Native rights, and the difference between immigrants and migrants and Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, and how we could collaborate. And a lot of the stuff was guided around health equity, mostly, in, obviously food under health equity. And soon as realized that we couldn't do a lot of the work if people didn't even understand what their rights were, or what the right, I think we started with how the census work and how the census really separate folks and leave folks out of the count. And through that, we did a lot of education around, especially, I think it was insurance rights and who qualify for medical insurance, because a lot of undocumented folks didn't have insurance, and it was because they were misclassified as immigrants, not as Indigenous, because the right of insurance was for Native Americans or Indigenous from the Americas, and a lot of people thought that was just North America, and it's actually not the truth. And then we started, going through that, and decided that we needed to start the Indigenous Peoples Network, and that's how the IPN started. And just put the next. I can't click. He's giving me permission to touch his computer, which is you guys heard it. So some of the partnerships and the best practices that we thought we could have as this trillium of organizations was for us to build trust, and because we knew if we started with just getting funding and money was going to be thrown at us and we didn't have trust, we could have break easy and not end in a good way. So we did building trust. We did a lot of reciprocity. We learned how to create a mission that it was aligned not just with our vision but with our community's vision. So we did a lot of work around that. We also have clear roles and work plans. And, you know, I think one of the most strong one was to center BIPOC partners and in design and leadership, and also in creating the budgets with us. And then we include a mix of established organization and other more grassroots groups in the partnership. Never know which one I have to click. So some of the other practices that we learned along the way is that we needed to put our mouth where the money was, or the money where the mouth was. And really, like, if we said that we were gonna facilitate conversation with this group of people, even though it was hard, we needed to have that conversation, and have like conversations, hard conversations, but from the heart with partners and communities. We also, is an N missing there? We learn history together and actually unlearn colonizing history. We learn from each other, from each other's struggles, and that really make us just closer in the struggle and in solidarity. We also understood that we couldn't do this work alone, that we had to do this work together, that we cannot see the work in silos, like do education and separate do like, you know, food justice, and separate do health equity. So we basically brought all those lenses to the table and create a holistic approach. And then we decided that even though we had a direction we wanted to go, we needed to kind of redirect some of the energy to get in. Sometimes we were getting off course, like, you know, like any other small group, like if somebody throw money at us and this, and we like shifted to the right, and then it's like, no, that's not what we want to do. We don't want to do voter rights. Like, we don't even believe in the system that way. So like redirect and do that together. And again, like keep talking about race and class and gender issues, no matter what, even though it was a hard conversation to have. And I think the most important lately has been to consult the elders in our communities, especially through the pandemic, and listen to their stories, because a lot of them are leaving, and it's important to keep that knowledge. And the last one is like, we are ready to transform our organizations and grow and be more grassroots and bring more people in. So this is where we are now in this partnership with other organizations. But before I move to the nitty gritty of the USDA and NRCS stuff, I really would like to hear who's around here in the table with us, who's in the room. If we have farmers right there in the chat, that you're a farmer, or you're a gardener, or a land care professional, or whatever your role in life is, because I don't know really who's here. I mean, I know some people, but not everyone. So I will give you a couple minutes for you to find the chat. And if you can't use the chat, you can unmute yourself and, you know, say your name and what you do quickly. We have farmers and farmers advocates. You guys are shy. Geez. That all we have? Nice. Nice. Welcome to the conversation, and I hope the rest of the conversation is not just me talking to you through the screen, but to become fighters in the same struggle. Nice. It's a lot of education, folks. Love it. So this question was specifically because sometimes I don't know who's here, you know, and I can think about hi Marty. It's so good to have coworkers in support of me when I'm struggling in front of the screen. So one of the conversations that I wanted to put it out there, and people can answer in the chat, or again, unmute yourself and say what you guys think conservation is and why it's important. No one? I mean, I know a couple of people that work doing conservation, so. Give you one more minute. Sorry, Tess, did I make you write when you're cooking? So I'm gonna give a little bit of history on conservation. Okay, I believe we lease our land part from conservation, not sure the particulars. Yeah, a lot of people don't know what conservation is and why it exists. So actually conservation started in the Roosevelt era, and it was actually to remove lands from indigenous people's hands and to conserve in what they call environmental preservation. So basically it was a racist thing. So people that had always had access to that land wouldn't have access in the name of preservation. So that's how the history of conservation started. And actually, the father of conservation is this guy called Madison Grant, which he wrote he was more famous for writing a book called The Passing of the Great Race, or the Racial Basis of European History. So that was the person that actually created the first conservation, and it was the Bronx Zoo. So, you know, with that idea of what started it, now conservation is used in many ways, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people now know a little bit about it. Is, you know, to conserve forests to now become homes, or, you know, other kind of, it's like water conservation, natural reserves, parks. So it's a lot of, it grew in a lot of ways, but it was an exclusive thing. So when we started talking about why people don't have access to land, what are the lands that are easier to get access, this is, you know, the piece that it started all with the Pocasset Pokanoket Land Trust. How people can have access to lands that have been stolen and then, you know, moved to a category where people couldn't hunt, couldn't fish, which it was the way of living of the native folks in this area. And how to use the tools that actually the government had created in our favor. in a way that we felt that it was not perfect, because we don't believe in ownership, but collective ownership is closer to the indigenous way than having private ownership. So we did that for about 2 years with PPLT, tried to find some pieces of land and that kind of stuff. And you know, we got here, and now we have a tool. PPLT, the Pocasset Pokanoket Land Trust, is a tool for indigenous folks to own land and preserve land and be able to do the things that traditional we are known to do. I don't know if folks have more questions. Sorry. So now we're going to shift a little bit of what the USDA is and what it stands for. And I don't know this question specifically. I didn't do a research on when the USDA started and all that, but maybe somebody has some history around this. But I imagine the history is very similar to the conservation history. You know, it was a tool for the government to you know, create some systematic way to shift resources from the government to farmers. And I know that a lot of you probably know that USDA have done, you know, some wrongs like the government had done. But I think it's, you know, things have shifted, and USDA have like probably one of the most proactive of all the government agencies on like, okay, this happened. I'm not saying that on their own, but with a lot of fight and struggles, have changed some of the policies around race and gender. And, you know, now in history, and now Marty is over there fighting all the time of how we're gonna fight these things. And I just, you know, it's always has been a struggle. And I think now we have this chance to work really close with an agency and not just learn from them and what they do and what resources they have, but also for them to learn what the struggles are for us and how to better help the people that have been wronged and stay out of the system for, you know, I don't know, 300 years, 500 years. Chief, help me, how many years? Too many years to count.
Way too many.
So I just gonna fly by these programs because this is what we do day in and day out here. But I promised that we were gonna talk about what the NRCS programs are and how people can take advantage of them. But I'm not gonna go super in depth on them. But if you have questions, you can always contact Matt or me or Jesse or Robert Purcell. He's here and he's one of the conservationists in USDA and the NRCS program. And I thought I saw Jack here too. So those are the people that can answer more in-depth questions, but we can be with you. We're also working on learning this pieces together, but yeah. Did I did twice? So the farm meal conservation programs are, you know, some are financial assistance program, the AMA program, the CSP program, the EQUIP program. And, you know, I will send you all this presentation and you can read all about that. But a lot of the programs are basically written. So if people have, are managing land, even if you don't own the land, but are managing land or forest land or have a greenhouse, or have, some sort of land-based operation, is a lot of funding to better the operation, to better manage the operations. So I think it's a program for every single farmer out there. But sometimes it's a inaccessible language sometimes it's inaccessible because you have to be savvy on the internet. But our job in the group is to make those things accessible. So if anything, whatever the need is, we're here to not handhold you, but be with you, and be it in the struggle with you, and make your application a success. And it's if you have issues with water, either with access to water or you have too much water, Jesse knows all about this, especially this year. It's a lot of incentives to apply to these programs. So the EQUIP program, which is I think the one that most people know about, is the one that provides technical assistance for having either conservation easements or any other needs that you have for keep wildlife the way it is, or even better, and also have improvements in your farm. So it's a lot of them. I'm not gonna go again each one, but yeah, you can do partnerships. This one, the Regional Conservation Partnership, it's kind of the work that we could do together with you, and help your farm or your organization to have more success in conservation. And it's really reading all these programs is what we do as Indigenous folks with our land. But we didn't know there was a way for us to get money around and to help us to do that job better, and actually to hire people that have that knowledge, or us to be hired to share that knowledge with other folks. I don't know. Yeah. Press. Okay. And now I pass it to Jesse. Well, yeah, that's.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Ulum and Matt, Global Village Partners. It's good to be here with everybody. Yeah, so we're thrilled to be in partnership with PPLT and Global Village, and our fourth partner is in Maine, Muhyiddin Liba, and he is with the Somali Bantu Community Association in Lewiston, Maine. And he could not join us this evening, but the four of us cover 3 states and have varying degrees of relationships with our NRCS offices, and also with farmers on the ground. And we all hold those different spaces. Ulum was going through a trusted partnership takes its understanding each other's roles and spaces that we can carry for and with each other. So that's what we're working to do together. I work for the organization World Farmers. You can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to have to remember that I don't have control over it. Thanks, guys. So World Farmers, I'm just going to tell you a bit about us, our program, and then a bit about how we engage with NRCS, or have in the past, and look forward to doing so in the future. And our key contact is Robert, who's on, as well as Martha, his colleague in the office. And we've been working with Robert for several years now. So it's good to see you, Robert. So World Farmers is based in Lancaster, Massachusetts, and that's the nonprofit organization. And our organization, sorry, talk slower. Thank you, interpreters. Our organization was founded officially in 2010, but the history of what we do in our Keystone program and who we are that all began in 1984. And I see some familiar names on here and also some unfamiliar. So I will go ahead and give some of the history. This is a very brief snapshot. My executive, Maria Morera, could not join us this evening. 7:30 p.m. is very late for a farmer, as I'm sure those of you who are farmers on here know. So she asked that I take this on. So World Farmers was founded in 2010 once we were asked, once the need arose among farmers within the programs for there to be an entity that was advocating on their behalf, working to build access to market, working to gain increased access to land, and to be putting through legislation that would create things like this high tunnel program. World Farmers is part of a national coalition that assisted to put the NRCS equip high tunnel program into the Farm Bill. And so those are all roles that we as a farmer advocate hold, as well as access to resources, both handholding and writing grants, but also USDA applications and resources that the government provides for farmers. So that's a snapshot of what we as World Farmers does, but really our bones is with the Flats Mentor Farm Program, which, next slide, please. You can see our Keystone land space is this 70-acre parcel in Lancaster, Massachusetts. So the program began when a Hmong farmer, a refugee from the Vietnam War, approached an immigrant farmer and asked for access to land. And that immigrant farmer knew what it was like to be landless in this country. And she offered her a piece of land. That was in 1983. And then in 1984, the farmer came back with her family and said, can we each have some land? And at that point, those farmers were offered land on this site that you see here. I actually have maps. I'm rethinking why I chose these maps now, because I have maps from way back when, and I wish that I'd put some of those up. But just between these, one is a hand drawn, so you can't, that's not really as indicative, but you can see the largest one is obviously a Google Maps screenshot, but that was from this past year. And then the one in the upper right-hand corner is a drone photo from 2016. And just from that, you can see a bit where we've been able to expand. But within 10 years from 1984, starting in 1984, within 10 years, there were 190 Hmong families in the program. Many of those Hmong farmers have since moved to other states to continue at their agricultural businesses. Unfortunately, many went into chicken farming in certain areas of the state and were brought in through FSA contracts that they didn't fully understand. Sorry, they were not FSA contracts. Sorry, I apologize. Into contract farming of contracts that they did not understand. And that was a lot of also the impetus for Maria, to my executive director, to start to see what kind of entity, what kind of space do World Farmers need to hold to really advocate for farmers that didn't know about or couldn't fully conceptualize the full spectrum of the agricultural system in this country. So starting in early 2000s is when farmers began to go to market. And then soon after that, we welcomed our first non-Hmong farmer into the program. And since then, we have increased to now we have over 300 farmers in the program who are originally from over 25 countries of origin. And I always say many more cultures than that. And they are not, up until a few years ago, we were all hosted by this land site. And within the last few years, World Farmers has worked hard to secure additional land to expand the program to. And we now operate on 5 different land sites, this one included. And we have facilitated individual access to land for farmers themselves for many more than that. So we have been able to secure farmland for and with the farmers with whom we work. And Unfortunately, every single one of them were greatly impacted by the weather this year, particularly this one because we're on a floodplain. And you can see that the remaining acreage on the kind of the right side of the map is uncultivated. And that's because we are abutted by fish and wildlife land, which causes a lot of, was used to be farmed by corn and was turned into fish and wildlife land in the 80s. And since then, the flooding issues have increased slowly but surely for our property, our 70-acre parcel, as that land started to convert. And now we cannot properly farm the remaining 10 to 15 acres of the land. Next slide, please. So this is a bit about the farmer program itself. It's really honestly much more natural than these 4 phases as written out. We've just found that this is the easiest way to communicate exactly the trajectory of the farmers in our program. So it's not as streamlined as this. Farmers are mentored by each other, seek mentorship by some of the landowners with whom we work. We hire certain farmers from within the program to be organizers themselves and also mentors. Many of them don't feel right submitting hours, so we give them a steady stipend because we know the work that they do to cultivate that space among each other. And that really does lead into the access to USDA programs that I'll get into. But there's a reason that we call the program Flats Mentor Farm, and that's because mentorship really runs through every bit of the program and is the main reason for the success of the program and all of the farmers in it. I just countless stories of farmers approaching another from another culture or from the same and better understanding what exactly it takes to grow these cultural crops in this climate. Even if it's a crop that the farmer is familiar with, we're dealing with a completely new climate, new pests, all of those things. So having that space where individuals can rely on others, particularly farmers of color or immigrant and refugee farmers who may have like or similar experiences, being able to approach another and rely on each other's knowledge rather than others from the outside, that's really key. And so if you look at our staff page, you'll see we're mostly folks that are connectors. We do our best to gain access to resources, those kinds of things. We leave the agricultural education to the farmers themselves and facilitate farmer connections among each other. Next slide, please. So I always want to touch on this for a quick moment in all of my presentations. Really the essence of our program are farmers of color, our diverse farmers, growing cultural crops for their same communities or for other cultural communities who are desperately in search of these crops. And so we work really hard. You'll see that I don't have any names of crops down. We work really hard to maintain that market space for the farmers with whom we work so that they can secure that stable market space as they build their businesses, all of which is key to accessing USDA programs, as you usually have to come up with a crop plan and business plan for any kind of FSA loan and such. Next slide, please. I always do this. I spend too much time talking about the program. We also facilitate access to markets. We are all about building individual businesses within our program. So the program's market access efforts started with farmers markets, and we have a one farmer, one market rule where each of the Flats Mentor farmers, there can be one placed at each market, and that's to avoid any kind of competition among the farmers within our program. Excuse me. And you see great demand and like love from customer to farmer for the crops that are offered by FMF farmers. These are some snapshots of better days. Right now, we actually have markets that folks can't attend because of limited crops. And that is climate change at its finest, and it will only get worse from here. And so we are seeing significant devastation among the farmers in our program. And like I said, that's happening on all land sites that we operate on, but most significant of which is the 70-acre parcel in Lancaster. Next slide, please. So among other things, in terms of access to resources, we facilitate access to USDA programs. So World Farmers has been connecting farmers to USDA programs since the early 2000s. I never know how to say that decade, and the early 2010s. And I apologize, I don't know the exact date, the exact year that we got the very first high tunnel at the flats. But every single high tunnel at Flats Mentor Farm has been facilitated through the NRCS EQIP high tunnel program, which is actually, let's do next slide, please. Both of these are just pictures, so you can kind of see everything. These are some of the farmers actually getting, you could see upper left-hand corner, Josephine, so excited to be entering into her high tunnel. So currently we have 15 high tunnels on the Lancaster land, and we actually had to just kind of pause there because we're running out of land that's appropriate and high enough for high tunnels. So the first high tunnel went in, like I said, in the kind of early 2000s / early 2010s. And from there, we facilitated usually in batches of about 3 to 5 farmers at a time through NRCS. And the way in which we do that really is, if you go back one slide, folks, thank you. You can see here, this is actually during COVID, and this is with FSA specifically, but we usually like to have USDA out to the farm. We'll have a meet and greet. We're always discussing USDA programs. So World Farmers meets with all farmers in our program over the winter months. And at that time, we will offer information on USDA at different levels. So depending on how interested the farmer is in pursuing and moving forward in the commercial aspect of our program, because we also have a food security, food sovereignty aspect of our program. So those who are interested in doing the commercial aspect really receive more hands-on education on what USDA programs are available to them. And for a long time, we really zeroed in when it came to NRCS on high tunnel access. And in the last few years, once we realized and recognized that it wouldn't be fair of us to place more high tunnels on the land given the lower areas of the land, we started to explore what NRCS could provide beyond high tunnels. And the high tunnels has been huge. And I'll share a little bit about a story that's been passed to me because it happened before my time. So it began with the Hmong farmers. Several, if not all of the Hmong farmers that are in our program have gone through the NRCS high tunnel program, EQIP program, received a high tunnel. And it has meant incredible gains for their businesses, their individual businesses, in terms of season extension and also, and therefore access to greater markets. And once Maria tried to, and World Farmers was working to get some of the other farmers through that program, which is like the Burundian farmers, East African farmers. She was met with a huge, a lot of hesitation from farmers and from those areas. And so something to know about the Hmong culture is they're very business driven and very excited and very dedicated to the business, whereas the culture within some of the East African communities that we were working with at that time are much more communally based, approaching farming, both approach farming as a lifestyle, but in different ways and as a passion and as a really as a need. And so what she found was that there wasn't a Burundian farmer that was wanting to move forward as an individual, and that they wanted to move forward as a group to co-own the high tunnel. And that unfortunately wasn't an option moving forward in the application process with USDA. So, and it also, to be honest, isn't the way in which we move forward our programming. So our program, like I said before, is very centered on building individual capacity for independent farm ownership. And that's for many reasons. But we do, of course, we facilitate cross-cultural, within cultural collaboration, learning, all of those things. But at the end of the day, we want the person to know that they can and should feel that they're welcome and have a place in this agricultural system in this country as an independent farmer themselves. So we did end up getting one farmer who was interested to move forward to receive a high tunnel. And after that, she was able to kind of show and demonstrate what that process was like for the other, not just Burundian, but also East African farmers in our program, including Tanzanian and Kenyan. And through her brave strides, after learning from the Hmong farmers, she was able to talk through in native language and across, within cultural ties to the other farmers that had been thinking about pursuing a high tunnel. And after that, there were Kenyan, Tanzanian farmers who were willing to move forward with USDA. So that kind of demonstrates the space in which we try to cultivate. We will invite USDA out to do meet and greets in a normal year. This past year, we moved forward in submitting 13 applications to EQIP. Next slide, please. For anyone who doesn't know what EQIP is, it's the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP. And there are many different areas in which you can qualify for conservation assistance. The best way to go about that is if you'd like to hear from firsthand experiences, as Ulum had said, reach out to any of us. We can connect you also to farmers who've been through it. We can walk you through it, but also Robert, who's on the call, is very open to having that dialogue with you as well, who's actually at USDA and in the NRCS office. And so we're moving forward, 12 applications. One farmer decided to wait a year to kind of see and observe the others go through it, similar kind of story to what I just told. And from that point, they can have access to different conservation practices such as irrigation, the high tunnel program, intercropping, cover cropping, and many others. I think I'm on time. Nope. Yes, I think I'm on time. If anyone has any questions for me right now, I know we're going to do Q&A later. I'm not seeing any pop up. So with that, I'll pass it back to Ulum to introduce Chief George.
Well, I hope everybody has like half hour because this is a long introduction. I'm just not serious. It's just the faces were too serious on the screen. Thank you, Jesse, for all you do, and also for painting that perfect picture of poor farmers and the Flat Mentors program, Interflats. I always say it wrong. And I want to welcome a dear friend and a brother and an elder. Chief Sequan Pijaki is his traditional name, or also lovingly we call him Chief George Spring Buffalo, or his colonizer ID name. And he's the chairman of Council of Chiefs of the Pocasset Wampanoag tribe of the Pokanoket Nation. It's a big name, but not as big as the heart and the work ethics for his people. I'm not going to say all the things he does because I don't think I have time, but he was actually the inspiring mind to move forward with this. And he's last but not least. We just like to be there after the women, and I really appreciate that. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for me. First, just like to say that I want to thank all our partners, that we're working with now. I've learned a lot of things from all of you. I want to also thank USDA and NRCS programs. Robert, we spoke before, and your team, very insightful. And I thank you for that. And we'll be coming back at you real soon. So, but this has been a venture. You know, I'm 64 years old, and this is kind of new to me. And I think when we first started out, it was a trust factor with us as Native people, because to us, the USDA was started back in 1600s when that 1621 treaty was signed with the Pilgrims. We taught them how to farm the lands. So I think that's where we go back to. So, so our trust factor of dealing with the federal government, you know, with contracts and so on, was kind of skeptical. My background is I'm a direct descendant of Asamiquan, which is who you call Massasoit, who was direct descendant that welcomed the Pilgrims. So I'm a direct descendant of Massasoit, and I'm also a direct descendant of King Philip, the King Philip War. If you have any history on that, kind of started the direction of the main colonialism in this country because they wanted to get rid of us. We held and still hold our reservation in Fall River in the Freetown State Forest. We were the first deeded reservation ever in the country. And it was deeded to us through the Benjamin Church deed back in 1709. In 1907, the city of Fall River wanted the water on the Watapa Pond, and they conversed the state to take a portion of our land and our reservation by eminent domain, which was an illegal taking to this day. So this is why we weren't too fond of the federal government trusting wise, because there's been a lot of dirt that's been done to our people. And on our reservation and throughout Tiverton, Rhode Island, Tiverton was our first reservation lands around Tiverton, Fall River, Pocasset, Freetown, Dartmouth, Bristol County, all that was called Pocasset at one time. So when we traded our reservation to be with all our people, all that area was called Pocasset itself, and it was called Pocasset Purchase that was done. And that's when we got moved over to the South Watapa, and lands were taken from us then. So going back to spreading the word, years ago, we formed a federation called the Affiliated Tribes of New England Indians out of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, up of Maine, New Hampshire. And the purpose of that was to basically let other tribes and clans know that everything wasn't for federally recognized tribes, because that's how the federal government was separating us, and kind of taking away from our culture of all of us coming together to kind of plant seeds of knowledge and traditions from the old elders. So we created the Affiliated Tribes of New England Indians. From that point on, throughout the years, we started capturing back things on our reservation in Fall River. There was a point where there was just one house on the reservation, and the state was saying that they were our guardian for years, and we challenged them. And when we challenged them, we put some trailers on the reservation. We started going back to see where the old herbal crops were, and, you know, traditional plants and so on. And the state kind of took notice to say, oh, we need to go along with this, because they knew that there was an injustice that was done to us, and we weren't there to fight them. We were there to bring back our culture and have a resting place for our ancestors' spirit. So from that point on, you can change the slide. This is the Watapa Reservation. The first slide on your left, that is a mound where our burial grounds is, where the water is, which is the Watapa Pond. And on the other side is another 98 acres of lands where there's 3 portions of our reservation, 2 portions of which they took. We still hold about 100 acres on another side. And on this reservation, there were a lot of herbs and different types of plants and flowers that we had. Dr. Perry, who was a well-known medicine doctor in our tribe, that used to go around to all the other tribes and heal, and also some of the colonial folks he used to heal. Next slide. About 4 years ago, Twin Rivers Casino was building a new casino in Tiverton, Rhode Island. So all of this area here, again, was all called Pocasset during the Pocasset purchase. This was our original reservation lands during our, deed that we got for the Watapa Reservation. So this land here, what we did was, you see a brook in the middle, it's called Sukh'il Brook. Sukh'il Brook was the first battle of the King Philip War. There's still burials over there. Philip's, Massasoit's first son, he was the first one killed in that battle, and he's still buried over there somewhere. This brook was a significant brook in a place as far as our history is concerned. So what we wanted with the casino is to have some type of collaboration with them where we would have access still to these lands, because we never gave these up in any treaties. And we worked it out with the casino, and this is where the Pocasset Pokanoket Land Trust was formed, where we formed a nonprofit during this, and we have an agreement with them where they are giving us money to repatriate land back to us, because we don't say that they're giving nothing back to us, because it never was theirs. It was always ours. And we work with them, peacefully, and we've been able to capture back probably about 20 acres right now, including this area here of Sukh'il Brook. We also received a open space grant through conservation about a year and a half ago to purchase some lands there that they gave us a grant for as well. So we're working with the system, with the state, federal government, local, to, capture back a lot of our ancestral lands, and a lot of these lands were farmlands. That's why everything was next to the water. Indians always have water because we need to grow, we need to eat. So you never see a village or a camp that's not next to water, because that was the whole purpose, for us to be able to live. And when we traveled from place to place, it was always next to the water. But also, we had high grounds, because that was where we always buried our people, also on the higher grounds. So, next slide. A few pictures of dealing with some politicians, which, you have to go that route sometimes, but it also builds relationships. And I like to educate people, because it's, you can fight people all day long, but if they don't know, they don't know. So they can't understand what you're talking about or give back what means something to you if they don't really understand your history and your true story. And a lot of our story has been taken not only from, the colonial side, but it's also been taken on the tribal side. out of personal gain, where, you know, people are more interested in casinos and trying to get money versus staying true to their heritage and their culture and staying true to people's territorial lands that's there. So these are, throughout the years, these are some of the people we advocated for. As you see, the Attorney General of Massachusetts, we did her ceremony, and you know, she's been doing good things since. So I think we blessed her good. We was at the Capitol advocating for some of our rights for the Watapa, and on the down below the right side, that's my team. And as you see no natives, you see white people that are there that are looking out for the interests of our people, and that's always there. So I never knock any other culture as long as they're looking out for the benefit of our people. And these are like my brothers and sisters. So I would go to the deathbed with them because they believe in us and I believe in them. Next slide. Okay, partners again. I like to thank all of these partners that been doing great things throughout the year, and I continue to want to do different types of grants and programs and services with them, because I know they have our back and we will always have your back. And I just want to say that the other thing is that I'm not sure if it was Robert that we spoke with or met with, but also we're interested in the hemp program through the USDA. A lot of people are talking cannabis and this and that. Well, hemp goes all the way back to our culture. It's a medicine. And that CBD that's been out there, and people are making money off of pushing bad products out there. I see a lot, but CBD and different types of herbs and that add to it, the cranberries that had different methods that they use for different THC and CBD stuff coming back around in our culture. And I think that USDA's promoting the hemp farms through the USDA, I think that's another good program for indigenous people to bring it back to their culture as far as for healing. So I'd like to look more into that and get more information on that. And a lot of our people that we've been telling about the USDA programs, this is something that they like to do on some of their own traditional lands as well. So I thank everybody. If everybody has any questions, I hope.
Thank you so much for that presentation. That was very informative. It was a great presentation. We do have time before the end of the session, about 15 minutes or so, for folks to ask questions. So please feel free. I think with the number we have in the room, you could raise your hand and come on camera if you want, or feel free to put things into the chat. And I'll start with a question. So I have a question about working with politicians. This is for Chief George, but anyone else who would like to comment too. So you mentioned working with politicians. I guess one question I have is, what are some things that you're working on right now in that regard, or what are some sort of big issues that you've sort of pursued in that direction?
Well, right now we're working with, directly with the Twin Rivers Casino in Tiverton, and also the Tiverton politicians down there to have our lands more accessible our cultural aspects and kind of preserve our burial grounds that are there, some of our treaty rights that are still there, and basically, a lot of lands that we're capturing, we're keeping it as conservation, because we also want to do some tourism. We want to do, we want to find resting places, that our people were from in different villages that are there, and work with the historical society, work with the community to kind of even build that tourism that's down there in Tiverton, because Tiverton is a place where farming was probably 70% farming down there. Now they're talking about solar farms. So it's about utilizing the land, people coming in that's not from that area, utilizing the land for the solar farms. Forgive me, that's my granddaughter over there that's trying to get in on things. But they're utilizing that types of lands as a farm, solar farms, where we're saying no, we want to bring it back to the farm area. And that's why I say that the hemp is something that, can be utilized not only in the industrial aspect. The United States government mandated back in the World War II, every farmer to grow hemp, for the simple fact that they needed that for ropes and, industrial stuff for the war. So I think that we're at a time now with this pandemic, and also economic wise, that we could be using that on the economic aspect, but also on a cultural and aspect to build communities, when wood is something that's a commodity right now. You can't get wood. Housing right now is slowed down. So if you look at the stock market and so on and so on. So I just think that the politicians right now, it's good for us to work with the states, whether it be Massachusetts or Rhode Island, to move things forward. And I'll put myself on mute and close myself a minute.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you.
Rosemary, if I could also answer that one,
Yeah.
I would say that also it's never too early to start planning for the Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill is coming up in 2023. And so the programs that we just talked about are all Farm Bill programs, not all, but yes, all. I don't remember, sorry. You can ask someone who's better at legislation than I can. But the Farm Bill is where we can start to increase, expand ideas of how conservation is involved in these programs. And if we want some more of these voices and of these perspectives involved, and if we want our local NRCS office to be able to move our application through in a different way or include new conservation practices, then they need to have the legislation to say they can do it. So I just would say also, let's be thinking about that. If there are barriers that we're hitting against, that's where we're going to be able to start to shift some things. One of the ways.
I just want to add one more thing to that too, is that what I felt was really important for us when we first received our first grant was that first, we weren't a federally recognized tribe, and we got the respect. But our liaison there, who since has passed, and bless him, really advocated for us, because language is important. And I think this is something that, I have conversations with Ron Harris and, people on the upper scale, that language is really important when it comes to grants for Native communities, because we speak a different language. So when grants are written in a certain way, it kind of throws us off, because we're trying to get in that door, and the door is being inviting to us. But if we're talking even wordings like ownership, and where, you know, it's a cultural thing to us. We don't own land, we use it, we protect it, it's Mother Earth, you know, or certain things that we have to, you know, abide by, or come in that door. It's hard for us as a culture for us to change that. It's just like us going to school and saying that, okay, we're going to learn English, but, you know, but if I go look back at my history and I say that you cut my hair, you took my language, you took my religion, and now you're trying to get me back to, you know, your culture again. Sometimes we have to bargain, and we have to have, in order for us to promote programs with your language, sometimes it's hard for us to kind of talk to our people when we're talking your language, if you can kind of understand what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So we can get it because we need to get the grants, but you know, you know, but you know, it'll be better if we had people that we're talking to that are real native folks, not just some people that are native liaisons that are not native, you know. So
that makes sense. I don't want to take. Do other folks have? If other folks have questions, please feel free to drop them. Oh, we have someone. Drop them into the chat, or you can come off mute.
I'll just say, this is Marty Dagobert. I'm the policy director at NOFA Mass, and thank you so much for just the diversity of narratives here, of lessons. This was a very, very rich, you know, series of presentations here. So thank you so much for bringing this and bringing your words and your hearts to this conversation in such a powerful way. So I guess I'm just thinking generally, and I'm trying to listen for ways that advocates in the organic world and in the agricultural world, and, you know, myself, I'm again as policy director of NOFA Mass, just the general, like, how can we leverage our work, our existing work, and our platforms to further these kinds of collaborative efforts that obviously are so powerful and so needed. And I think I feel, again, I'll speak for myself, I often feel at a loss for how best to support these intersecting movements. So any advice for me or those in my shoes as an advocate in the you know, local agriculture and the organic world?
I don't know if these are words of wisdom, but definitely, I feel like, I mean, I don't know if you remember, Marty, but you were with me at one of the Farm Bills conversations when the Farm Bureau put that, I don't know, 4 years ago, probably, when, you know, when Trump decided to put, you know, Purdue there, and he came to Massachusetts and have this conversation. And you know, sometimes we feel like we're losing, but because we're not passing some legislation. But if we get people involved and people educated around these processes, I think we're still a win. You know, even if we lose the big battle, we're getting people ready for the next one. And I have to say, like, from that time to now, I feel like people understanding of racial inequities and, you know, social interactions and social and economical inequities, especially in the food system after a pandemic, and see a whole food system like overload, and realizing that locally we can't support, you know, we can't keep going at this rate without supporting the small farmer, the like, and you know, Jesse said, you know, the environmental catastrophe that probably to come behind, you know, the medical, I mean, it's a lot of stuff, and if people don't know how to deal with that, I mean, I think we're in a loss if we don't keep doing the work of education in that sense, and push, after the people are educated, to action. I mean, for us, this conversations that we have all the time is like asking people to take some action. And I think like the opening of hearts and to try to do a change of hearts, to try to explain to people how the actions of the government and how the actions of the system had impacted the communities, and just, we're not looking for who to blame. We're just looking to like set the record straight and move forward in a way that is more equitable. I think at least with that open-minded and open heart, we can move forward in a better way, because we all standing in this land together. We're not leaving, we're not moving. So we have to figure this out together. And the best way to do that is to recognize that some wrongs had happened, and that the people have lived here the most, or the most have to lose. And it's ways, it's ancient ways to do things right, and just need, support and recognition.
Yeah, a process of truth and reconciliation can't happen without calling out those truths of the past. And it can, there's the question of why are we bringing up these evils while we're trying to work with the good components of these efforts, but we can't rebuild any trust. We can't figure out strategies that really bring real partnerships together if we don't put those tough histories and the current repercussions, in terms of exclusion and racism, like, on the table.
And I think that's
that goes through some of that. I'll just share it.
Right. And I think that's why our partnership is unique. We have a round circle of folks. And I think that when we were putting the grant together, we kind of seen that amongst us all, that, wow, this is special. And I think that, dealing with, the NRCS and the USDA, the more that we start to understand your programs, on your level, I think that the dialogue that we're having now is important, so you can kind of understand our past history, traditional methods as well, just like our partners have. And I think, we're coming back around a circle, and, some people say no, but I see it with this pandemic again. And I think that what we didn't do the last time, we have to be in front of this, as far as, helping and services, from the federal government this time. It can't be before, where it was, throw it out there, and we have a new administration. So we're hoping for that, but this dialogue that we're having, I think, is very, very important, because, seeing faces and talking and feeling, to me, that's something that we can always have together, and we can pick up the phone, and there's a trust factor. And to me, trust is everything, when it comes down to it. So I thank you guys.
Thank you. We are pretty much right at 8:30, so I think we'll probably conclude the session. But thank you all so much for this. It was just a wonderful conversation. Thank you for presenting today.
And my granddaughter says she thanks you too.
I'm very familiar with the child interjections into meetings. So thank you all so much. I do want to just, before we leave this call, I just want to put in the chat a link to an evaluation. You know, we are always interested in your feedback, so please fill that out. I also want to let you know that you can save the chat. So if you want to save links that popped up in the chat, there's at the bottom right of the screen, there are 3 little dots. And if you click that, there is an option to save chat. So I encourage you to do that. And then finally, I just wanted to encourage everyone once again to, visit our the vendors, the virtual vendor space, and also check out the auction. Those things are still going on. And I don't know, Jocelyn, if you want to chat those links out, but if you save the chat, they're there from earlier. All right, so thank you all so much. There's more conference to come, so please check the program, and hope to see you for more of these events.
All
Thank
right.
you. And thank you all.
Aquanate.